Hey everyone, this is our 6th installment of the first Dragon Age playthrough. In this one, we are going to go to the Storm Coast, meet the Blades of Hessarian, as well as talk to Vivienne and Blackwall. Now, when we recruited Blackwall, we got the option to use his Grey Warden treaties to increase our standing in the world, which, as you can see, we just did. We used Liliana for that. That's going to become important later. In the first game, we learn a good bit about the Wardens and their connection to the Blights, which is when you have an Archdemon and Darkspawn invade the entire surface. Very bad time for everybody. So right now we're unlocking the Black Emporium. The Black Emporium was introduced in the second game as a way to get some really cool weapon schematics, as well as a way to change your appearance since the game took place over 6 or 9 years, I forget which. And people did comment that it was weird that your character would have the exact same hairstyle and makeup for that long a period of time. Here we go. This is in Kirkwall. It's not in Ferelden or Orlais, the areas that we're primarily in this game.
Handle the merchandise with care.
So as we run around, we'll notice a lot of cool stuff. This little dialogue box, if you can't read it because it's too blurry, basically says that the guy is so old that he has to be bathed by hand by a small child because he can't handle any rougher of a touch than by a tender child. It's a little creepy, more than a little, really. And we're going to go over here. Right now, we can't afford any of this, as you can see by all of the red, but we can go over to the mirror. So as you can see, we could change our appearance here if we wanted to.
Well, I'm obviously in no position to judge.
Jerk face. This is handy from an RPG point of view if you want to start with your character maybe looking messy and then moving into a more refined style, or maybe starting with a refined style and then going to more of a combat style. It's completely up to you. Now that we're done shopping, always fun, we are going to head back out to the Storm Coast. We know that Scout Harding told us that some of our men have gone missing and may have encountered some bandits. We're going to follow up on that and see if we can figure out what happened to them.
These must be the missing soldiers.
I will see that their families are notified when we return.
Our men were murdered by a group called the Blades of Hessarian. It seems there's a way to challenge their leader.
Naming themselves after the sword that killed Andraste. Ambitious.
Right. Blades and their challenges. Biggest sword wins.
It looks like the bandits are camped further along the beach.
You can always rely on Sarah to have her mind in the gutter. She's always going to come out with a dick joke or a sex joke or something like that. I have to admit, it is probably one of the reasons why I do really like her, even though she is a very problematic character. So, as we know from the note that was crumpled up and may or may not have been left on purpose by one of the members of the Blades, there is a way to challenge their leader so that we only have to fight him and not the entire group. And since I am a foraging addict of sorts, we already have the stone that we need to make this Mercy's Crest. All that we need is a Deepstalker hide. And since I happen to know from more playthroughs than I'd like to admit, where there is a cave with some Deepstalkers, that's where we're headed now.
You know, Cassandra, you really ought to have armor with gilding. Or dragon scales. Preferably both.
Would that not be impractical?
It would be dramatic, my dear. Half the value of armor is intimidation.
I prefer the half that keeps blades out of my innards, personally.
And that's why we love Cassandra. Also, we got our Deep Stalker hide. I edited it out because it was just random boring fight number 5. For anyone who's currently sitting there wondering who the hell Hessarian is and who Andraste is and what the hell this has to do with anything, basically Andraste is the prominent figure of the dominant Thetis religion. The Maker is God. Andraste is his bride. She was betrayed and died by fire. Hessarian, the man who ordered her to die by fire, took mercy on her at the last second and put a blade through her heart to end her suffering, hence why the sword is revered.
Someone's come with a challenge.
The others failed.
So you would challenge the Blades of Hessarian?
That's why I'm here.
You killed soldiers of the Inquisition. We cannot let this stand.
You want justice? Claim it.
Dragon Age does a pretty good job of handling the different religions in their world. They do a reasonable job of showing the pros and cons of each side.
It's done.
So long as the rest agree to play nice, right?
If anyone is wondering what this gold glowing ring is that I do all the time, that's the search feature. It helps you find loot and herbs and just stuff.
Your worship, the Blades of Hessarian are at your service. If you want eyes on the coast, here we are.
I've not heard of the Blades of Hessarian.
Our work is often misunderstood, but we serve Andraste and whoever proves worthy of wielding us.
You and your blades are loyal to the Inquisition.
We're loyal to you. I suppose that's the same thing, your worship.
So there's no ill will over what happened with your former boss?
The man was a bastard. You're not the first to stand up to him. You're just the first to win, and we're happy with that. Besides, I would rather swear my life to the Herald of Andraste.
Do you have anything to report?
Nothing of note, your worship.
I should go.
You know where to find us.
Hence why that note may have been left deliberately. Good rule of thumb, don't be a jerk face when you're in charge. Otherwise you may get usurped. Enough stormy weather. Let's head back to Haven, where we're gonna follow up with Blackwall and Vivienne. They each have their own unique backstories.
If the Inquisition wants to field a decent cavalry, it needs better horses. I heard Seeker Pentagast might try to acquire suitable mounts from Master Dennett in the hinterlands. uncle was 5th Praetor.
And what's that mean for you back in Arnsberg?
Honestly, about as much as it does here.
Some of the NPCs do have an adorable dialogue that tells a little story in and of itself. I'm going to try to catch all of theirs.
Make her look at it. So much easier to ignore when it's far away. And to actually walk out of it. To be that close.
It's right there. We could take a trip if you're that curious.
I'm gonna have to decline. At least until I learn more about it. I have to admit, I thought you'd be...
Human.
Yes.
Being upfront is better than knife ear.
It was a foolish thought. Should have known better than to say anything. It's what you do and how you do it that's important. Just one question then. How do you think you fit in with all this?
I just want to help stop the war. Try to put things back in order.
A worthy goal, one I'm happy to support. For me, I'll be satisfied so long as we find the bastards that killed the Divine. They owe us some answers. I've heard rumors of abandoned warden camps all over these parts. If we have time, I'd like to take a look, see if there's anything we can salvage.
Let's talk about the Grey Wardens. You must know a lot about them.
Ah, the Wardens. I'm afraid we're less exciting than we seem.
The Blight's been over for 10 years. What do Wardens do when the world's not ending?
There is still Darkspawn. Just because we killed so many in Ferelden doesn't mean they're gone. And the world is not so peaceful that there's no use for good men with swords. Sometimes you have to figure out for yourself what the pledge to protect others really means. It's not always about just archdemons and blights.
Where were you during the Blight?
I was in Ferelden, on my own like always. Quietly killed my fair share of Darkspawn too.
You haven't had contact with other Wardens for a while. Why were you on your own?
Just what I've always done. Recruitment only requires one man. Besides, I've always been a loner. Works best for everyone that way.
So you have no idea where the rest of the Wardens are?
Do you find that odd? The Blight is over. We don't need an organised force. And orders don't change much from day to day. For the last 1,000 years or so, it's been just find Darkspawn, kill them, repeat as necessary.
Let's continue this at another time.
As you wish. I'll be here if you need me. I'm here.
I want to hear more about you.
Compared to yours, my life will seem dull indeed.
Your name, Blackwall, doesn't sound Orlesian. Marcher then. Ferelden.
I was from the Free Marchers originally. Markham. That was a long time ago. Another life.
I hear that many Wardens were once criminals.
You're right. And when you join, your past is forgotten, so let's leave it that way.
What did you do before you became a Warden?
I was a soldier, a nobody trained to wield a sword and follow orders. I grew weary of fighting other men's wars.
So you became a Warden?
More or less. Becoming a Grey Warden was the first time I felt like I mattered. The life I led before seems hollow in comparison. Perhaps one day it will fade away.
Why did you join the Wardens?
Because they remember honor and sacrifice. Words that have little meaning to the rest of us. Because they lay down their lives for those they have sworn to protect. We all need to believe there are such men in the world. I needed to believe I could be one of them.
We can continue this discussion at another time.
Very well.
Blackwall, like Solus, is a character where if you listen to the conversations between your party members, you can figure out some stuff about him that will later be confirmed.
Nothing right now.
but I'm not saying right now, because that would be a spoiler, and spoilers are bad. By the way, knife here is one of the common derogatory insults aimed at elves.
You've never been to a circle as far as I can tell, yet you're remarkably skilled. Were you self-taught?
The Dalish have their own traditions, you know. The Circle isn't the only authority on magic.
I have heard about the traditions of magic among the Dalish keepers, but it's all third-hand. In my own experience, nothing is more deadly to a young mage than a lack of knowledge, which makes the current state of things precarious. What do you imagine will happen if the circles are not restored? Do you foresee the Dalish taking us all under their wing?
The war benefits no one. It must end, and order must be restored.
If only the rebels saw things so clearly. Justinia's death has shattered the balance of power in Thedas. If it is not restored quickly, countless lives will be lost. Mages, Templars, innocent people of all kinds now look to the Inquisition to decide their fate.
I'll try not to let them down.
Failure is a luxury we cannot afford, my dear. For almost 1,000 years, the world believed it was in the hands of the Maker. And now many believe you are the agent of his will. Whatever the truth is, that belief gives you power.
Nobody should claim to know the will of the Maker. Not me, and not the Chantry.
Perhaps nobody should. But if no one leads the way, many will be left behind in darkness. I've stolen enough of your time, my dear. Don't let me keep you. Yes?
I wanted to ask you about the Circle of Magi.
Of course. What do you wish to know?
If the Circle disbanded, how can you still belong to it?
The Circle is an idea, my dear, and an idea cannot be dissolved. Many of the first enchanters voted for rebellion, caring little that anything short of a unanimous decision would pit mage against mage. Rather than dissolving it, Grand Enchanter Fiona's vote split the Circle in two. The rebels follow her, the loyalists follow me.
If you led all the loyalists, why are you only First Enchanter and not Grand Enchanter?
Grand Enchanters are elected, and since there are no First Enchanters besides myself, no vote can be held. I could name myself Grand Enchanter, but the title holds no meaning now. When the circles are restored, that will change.
What was it like to live in a circle?
My dear, your question is the root of all problems with mages. I cannot tell you. Every circle was different. Their Templars were different, their politics unique. And every person within each tower had an experience of circle life unique to themselves. Some people suffered and some were content. Some were cruel, some compassionate, and some indifferent. The same is true of people everywhere, in all circumstances, whether they are mages or not.
So tell me about your personal experience with the Circle.
I enjoyed life in the Montsimard Circle, my dear. It was an edifice devoted to knowledge and refinement. And there is comfort to be had, you know, in the company of fellow mages. Those born without magic will never truly understand us.
You must have been under constant supervision, being forced by Templars to live in the tower. Was that hard to endure?
My dear, I have a suite in the palace and a wing at my dear Duke Bastien's estate. I've never been forced to live anywhere. Most circles allowed mages to live away from the tower, either on their own or in service to the nobility. All that was required was permission from the first enchanter. Some circles were harsher in their restrictions. Kirkwall was the worst, but it was the exception. Most were quite permissive, perhaps too permissive in retrospect.
How did we come to this state with the circles in revolt?
A failure of perspective that infected circle leadership. Mages lived solely in a world of Templars and mages. They could not even imagine what was beyond the tower walls. Kirkwall gave the world a reason to remember its fear of magic. A mage killed hundreds with a snap of their fingers. Across Thedas, a new tangible fear of magic grew. Commoners and nobles alike called out to the Chantry for protection. But the malcontents in the towers thought nothing of this. They cared only for themselves and for their anger at the new Templar restrictions. When a mage attempted to assassinate Divine Justinia, again, the mages protested the investigation. The leadership chose to vote on independence based on the intolerable conditions imposed by the Templars, sparing no thought to the fact that magic was more feared in the aftermath of these attacks than it had been since Tevinter's day. So long as they had their freedom, they could care little for riots, angry mobs, or about pitting mages against each other.
Are you familiar with Grand Enchanter Fiona?
We've met. Before her horrendously ill-timed and selfish vote for independence, I thought her adequate at her job. In her dotage, she could not handle looking after the well-being of so many people. We would have done better to replace her years ago, to let her spend time gardening.
Did they have cause to rebel?
In the aftermath of their terrorist attacks? Was that really the most opportune time to break away? By all means protest abuses by the Templars. Just don't do it in a way that says mages support wholesale murder. By voting when they did, my colleagues all but declared war upon the ordinary people of Thedas. A war in which we are outnumbered 100 to 1.
I thought the fighting was only between mages and Templars. Why are mages fighting mages?
The vote for independence was carried by only a small margin, but Fiona chose to let the motion stand. Those who opposed a rash declaration of war against the entire free world had little choice. By breaking from the Chantry when they did, the rebels declared themselves in support of mass murder. Anyone who did not wish to support terrorism and the slaughter of innocents was forced to take arms against the rebels. Yes?
I wanted to ask you about the Circle of Magi.
Of course. What do you wish to know?
You must have an opinion of the Templars after living so long in the Circle.
Having opinions about Templars, my dear, is exactly like having opinions about mages or Navarans or men. I have known some who are impossible to endure and some who are utterly charming. I have suffered insults at the hands of those in the armor, but no more than I endured from nobles or tradesmen in Val Royaux. Personally, I have found the Templars a useful tool, skilled at keeping more unpleasant elements at bay. Yes?
I'd like to know more about you, Madame Vivienne.
Whatever would you like to know?
Your accent's not Orlesian. Where exactly are you from?
I am from the Circle, my dear. One's country of origin rarely matters there. But if you must know, I was born in Wycombe in the Free Marches. I was sent to the Ostwick Circle, but I transferred to Monsignor while still an apprentice.
I'm curious how a Circle mage winds up a courtier.
Nobody winds up at court, my dear. It takes a great deal of effort to arrive there. I caught the eye of Duke Bastien de Ghislaine, an advantageous connection that opened many doors. When the position of Enchanter to the Imperial Court became vacant, I was able to secure it.
You're married to the Duke de Ghislaine?
Of course not, my dear. Don't be ridiculous. Marriage is the business of alliance and inheritance. I'm Bastien's mistress.
What duties does a court enchanter have?
I am tasked with providing assistance to the Empress on arcane matters. Most of my predecessors restricted this to lighting lamps and doing parlor tricks. In such troubled times as these, however, I provide political advice to Her Majesty on the subject of the Mage Rebellion.
Vivienne is a difficult character in a lot of ways. I struggled with what to say here. I've consulted with my friends, I've given this a lot of thought, both before this recording, and I've re-recorded this several times, trying to figure out what I wanted to say. At the end of the day, she's a character who had a lot of potential that wasn't realized. We'll talk more about that later as we get into areas of the game where she could have been more useful and could have been a much stronger aspect of the story. People have responded very negatively to her personality traits who didn't respond the same to white characters with similar traits or opinions. She took what had been a joke of a position and made it into something real, something to be respected. She definitely got the short end of the stick when it comes to writing. Now, since I have had to resort to copying and pasting transition scenes to keep talking, I'm going to shut up. And we're going to bring this to a close. Our next segment, we will talk to Sarah, follow up with her, and see what our next step is in our journey to save Thetis.